Now, this week, two key issues have dominated the agenda. The release of the Paradise Papers details the tax minimisation practices of some of the world's most high-profile companies and individuals. And the other was the citizenship saga plaguing the federal parliament and, of course, Manus Island, which we're reporting on.
That's right. That is an unfolding situation. Well, to discuss this and the other top stories this week, we're joined by the Chief Executive of Youth Action, Katie Acheson, and Policy Manager at the New South Wales Business Chamber, Rebecca Burdick. Good morning to you both. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us here.
It is quite a significant day when we reflect on not just Remembrance Day, of course, Saturday being the 11th of the 11th, 99 years since the end of World War I, but also we have that unfolding situation in Manus Island. We've just heard from our reporter Liam Fox that there may in fact be a shifting in that deadline. So it's hard to get a handle on exactly what might be unfolding there today, but the potential for forcible violence to be used to have these people forcibly evicted from the centre. So is this a situation that we could have avoided, do you think, Katie?
Oh, look, I think it's so strange. Australia is so good at so many things, and we are so bad at caring for the world's most vulnerable people. It's like we have a responsibility to asylum seekers. Every country in the world has a responsibility to process asylum seekers and to who are fleeing discrimination and violence and persecution. And what we've done is we have put them offshore and then gone, oh, wait a second, this isn't a good idea. Let's shut it down. Oh, that's all right, they can just make their way out. It is just unacceptable. This is our world shame. We're on the Human Rights Council at the UN to be the judge of the world, to say what are the things that are going on. We should have a responsibility to be the leaders in this field, and yet what we have done is a shame to us.
Rebecca?
I think it's not possible to disagree with the fact that we need to treat asylum seekers compassionately. I don't think any right-thinking Australian would say that we don't want to house vulnerable people, that we don't want to welcome vulnerable people fleeing war-torn countries into our shores. What we do want to stop, though, is the people smuggling trade. We don't want to encourage the people smuggling trade. I think we also want to, there's no doubt that we want to avoid deaths at sea, and we used to see thousands of innocent lives lost at sea. I think it's in everybody's best interest to see the men on Manus Island resettled safely and without incident. I don't think anyone wants to see violence happen in that resettlement process. It's a difficult political situation, and I can't really come up with the silver bullet answer at the moment.
Well,
somebody has to.
Before you go on, let's just remind ourselves of where we're at and how this was couched in terms of Get Up released the video, which is quite shocking to a lot of people.
Yeah.
The government responded by saying these people have had plenty of opportunity to leave. Let's just have a listen.
What we saw there was nothing short of what I would describe as a humanitarian crisis.
All those people in Manus Island who are at that detention centre are effectively squatting.
Right, that was pretty quick there from Christopher Pyne, the government minister. And Katie, what's your response to that? The government essentially maintaining that line. They've had the opportunity. They need to move out to other accommodations.
So who's had the opportunity? The people who've been in detention for that amount of time and been waiting for the process, and now the gates are open, they're saying, now you're squatting. We put you here, we put you in this place, we shut it down, there's no running water, we're not going to provide for you, you're squatting. That's ridiculous. Australia has a really good systems of resettlement in Australia. We have we're supposed to, the targets for next year are over 18,000. We never reach even 10,000 mark. We have 8,000 spots that are ready and waiting in Australia that have processes and programs in the community to support these people. It's 600 people that we have left there for this time. We have a responsibility to process them, and we're not doing that.
I think it's clear that there's been bipartisan support for offshore processing arrangements for some years. So Kevin Rudd actually set up Manus Island. This isn't a legacy of the coalition government, and the coalition government has continued it. PNG government now can't continue operation of the centre. I think there's bipartisan support for offshore processing. I don't think that we can shift gears immediately now because we're hit with this crisis in Manus Island. I don't think that it's right to pin blame on the government for the fact that it can't continue operation in Manus Island and that it wants to resettle these 600 people as safely and as quickly as possible. And I think it's in everyone's best interest that that happens right away.
This isn't about politics. This is about people's lives. This isn't about Labor and Liberal, and we've seen them fight about this for the longest time. We have a responsibility. This is a human rights violation, and we are the ones doing it. So who cares what the label is, what flag we're flying under? We have a responsibility to the world, like in the world community, to resettle these people, and we haven't done our job. It is our shame.
All right, now another issue dominating, of course, the ongoing citizenship drama in Canberra. Now, also this week, we saw Sam Destiari from Labor. His background, his ethnicity questioned in a fairly ugly incident, it has to be said, in a Melbourne pub. Let's just remind us what happened.
Yeah, I got some money from China, mate. You want some money or what? What?
G'day, mate. Come here.
You terrorist, you little monkey.
You hook us up some beers, mate? Any Chinese payments tonight? Come on, mate. Free beers on us, eh?
Thanks, guys. Say hi to United Patriots Month for me.
No, we're not. This is Patriot Blue, mate.
Okay, same thing.
No, it's not, mate.
Same thing.
Hey,
It's actually.
why don't you go back to Iran, you terrorist?
Now, I know, sort of, Katie, that this has alarmed you as far as the rise of white nationalism in Australia is concerned.
Yeah, look, Youth Action is partnering with a group called All Together Now on a project called CAPE, where we're trying to challenge, or training up young people basically to challenge hate speech online and to have social cohesion conversations. So what we're seeing is this rise of young people and people in Australia feeling excluded, and we're fighting against each other. I mean, do we really want to become like the United States and Britain and Europe, where we see this like extremism that is rising, where people are feeling really isolated and alone, and what it's doing is creating hate speech and discrimination, which is what we saw with Sam Destiari. He's a public figure, but no one in Australia should be facing that discrimination. That was disgusting.
Rebecca, what did you make of those images that we've seen and heard?
They were absolutely offensive. That kind of conduct is absolutely offensive to any right-thinking Australian. And I think it's not representative. I guess I disagree with Katie here in that I don't think it's representative of mainstream Australian sentiment. So absolutely there is racism in Australian society. It's undeniable. This video is undeniable evidence of that. But I don't think the majority of Australians share those views.
So you don't think it's more widespread than is obvious?
No, I think those guys are the outliers. And this is the thing with social media. It's both a boon and a burden. So it's great in that it means that we can identify where this kind of abhorrent behaviour is occurring, and we can try and root it out. We can really band together to root out that kind of offensive racist sentiment from our society. But I think what it also does is it implies that most Australians, or a lot of Australians, share those views. And I really don't think that's the case. I think from a business perspective, business is very supportive of our multicultural, multi-ethnic society. Business is very supportive of immigration. We bring skills and capacity that we simply haven't been able to develop locally. So immigration has been a massive driver of our economic growth. It's been a massive boon for all Australians. I think that the sentiments expressed by those men in that video were disgusting, and I think that behaviour is abhorrent, and I think most Australians would join me in expressing those views.
That does feel like a long week. You can believe it actually began with the release of the Paradise Papers, which Four Corners had their special on Monday. Now, of course, this is all about, it was a mass dump of documents that detailed tax minimisation and avoidance by some very prominent companies and individuals. And of course the question was put to the government, is enough being done to stamp down on this avoidance? Here's the Treasurer, Scott Morrison.
What it does do is, I think, shine a further light on the way that structures are put in place. Now, that's why I was very pleased to hear the Tax Office say at Estimus recently that they believe that the arrangements we've put in place for multinational anti-avoidance and matters like that is entirely fit for purpose and is doing the job we want it to do.
And Rebecca, business has been criticised. Certainly international businesses that do business here in Australia, they're not pulling their weight, they're not paying enough tax. Is the government doing enough to crack down on that?
Well, we support businesses in Australia who do the right thing. So absolutely, we support businesses abiding by their obligation to pay tax and to support greater good public outcomes through paying and contributing to our tax system. The corollary of that is that we don't want businesses to have an unfair advantage, businesses doing the wrong thing to have an unfair advantage over businesses doing the right thing simply because they have a more elegant tax structure or tax arrangements to rely upon. In saying that, we also live in a global economy. We need to be competitive against other countries in a global economy, and companies will seek out arrangements that provide them with a competitive edge. Now, in Australia, we have one of the highest company tax rates in the world. That is not a competitive environment. We're not running a competitive business environment here, and that's why we support a cut to the company tax rate. If we were to see that, I think we'd see fewer businesses trying to seek out these arrangements, legal arrangements, where they can legally minimise their tax obligations.
Do you think that the climate, perhaps for a corporate tax cut with Paradise Papers revelations being made, is still as favourable?
I found it such an interesting thing to watch, like just how it unfolded. I mean, what a bad leak, but what a great leak for kind of revealing what's going on. I think in the last 4 years we've seen a real budget savings in Australia has been focused on getting it back from welfare, and we're squeezing the poorest people. I mean, young people who are looking for a job are living on $38 a day. It hasn't gone up since 1996, and yet a lot of the legislative targets and focuses on budget savings have been on, let's look at welfare, and we're squeezing these tiny drops, whereas we have this massive pool of money in tax avoidance that's coming from companies. And we're demonizing young people who are looking for jobs, and we're not demonizing these very wealthy people who are purposely stealing money from us so that we don't have better schools, that we don't have the hospitals that we need, that we can't build roads. This money is tax money that would go into our economy and would build the society that we want, and we're allowing these people out because we want their business. I think that something has got to be done.
I think we need to get real here, Katie, which is that the majority of the tax money that we collect is actually from business. So let's get real. It's not derived from income tax arrangements, it's drawn from business. So business is supporting better infrastructure, is supporting better hospitals and houses. As I said before, we should not be supporting companies that seek to avoid their obligations to pay tax. We need tax in order to get a stronger economy, and we're supportive of that. But I don't think that you can really tar all business with the same brush, and certainly not small businesses, which I represent.
You're talking about legislative changes. Let's see legislative changes that look at that take the seriousness of tax avoidance and deal with something. So absolutely, let's get a proper system in place that supports businesses to thrive in Australia, 100%. But don't allow people to steal tax money away from the Australian people.
All right, we are going to have to turn to one final topic of the news of the week, and that is looking at what those Year 12 students have been going through. Obviously, in New South Wales, it's the HSC. What does that ATAR score?
Well, because the exams are over, I reckon.
Exactly.
There's lots of young people celebrating their result.
Have people, do you think, kept up with what are the demands of the time with the way that we're structuring this system?
HSC is a completely out-of-date way of preparing young people for the future. It's like, so we use this very intense test, and actually teachers are spending 2 years preparing young people for a test, not for life outside of school. So we're not preparing them for higher education or further education and training like VET and TAFE. We're actually putting all this pressure on if you could just win at this one test, and then we let them out free.
But it has been reformed. Can I remind you, and I'm going to show my age here, when I did my final year, it was 100%.
Yes.
Of my marks to get into university were based on the one exam.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you get the assessment across the year. Is that not a fair system, though?
No, we do it better in other states and territories. I mean, there is better ways of doing it where you look at the merit over the whole time, and the test is about banning the school in an appropriate way to say that is an A in one school the same as an A in another school. And that is a really successful way that doesn't put stress on that one test.
I think the real question here is the question of the ATAR, and that applies nationally. So every student in Australia who wants to go to uni, or even who just finishes Year 12, will be, and they participate in exams, they'll get an ATAR. They'll be followed by that number for quite some time after that. So when they go into the workforce, they'll be followed by their ATAR result. When they go to university, they'll be followed by their ATAR result. Is that the best way to measure a student's capacity for work, to measure a student's capacity for higher education? I think what we would say is it isn't. So an ATAR doesn't really signify whether somebody has the skills that business is really after in the 21st century. So what we know from business is they're not necessarily after subject matter experts from day one. What they want is they want young people who enter the workforce who can work collaboratively, who have creative thinking capabilities,
but
who
how do
can
you
work
assess
in a
that?
team. Well, actually, the evidence shows that you can assess those things. So in Finland, if we look at some of the best education systems, the highest performing education systems in the world, like Finland, they are exploring and exploiting and measuring approaches like project-based learning. So, and they don't measure that through high stakes tests. Students in Finland do a national matriculation exam, but that doesn't, I guess the result of that, I think, is about 10% of the final mark that they receive at the end of their schooling. The other thing that we see in Finland, and in Germany too, is that they're, at the end of schooling, all kinds of success is recognised, acknowledged and praised. So we're not just talking about kids who can swat over a book and regurgitate some fantastic quotes from Hamlet, or who can analyse something really well in an essay. What we see is that students are recognised for vocational achievement. So kids who are really good and have fantastic vocational skills are recognised. And we want to see some of that learning transferred here in Australia. We have a system here that's born of the industrial age. It's born of an age that we've moved past. We want to see a 21st century school education system where every kid is set up for work and life after school. We should be producing whole human beings who can work well and contribute.
Bursting with great ideas as always, Katie Acheson and Rebecca Burdick. We're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much for joining us this morning on Weekend Breakfast.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.